Good morning, everybody. Bowinn Ma, Minister of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, joining you here today from the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Today, Minister Ralston and I will be providing an update on the wildfire situation here in British Columbia. We've been fortunate to have had rain and cooler temperatures throughout much of the province over the last several days, offering much needed relief to many communities. Many evacuation orders due to the Shetland Creek wildfire in the Venables Valley have been downgraded to an evacuation alert, including for Ashcroft and for Cache Creek. And thankfully, the remaining orders and alerts that were in place for the Antler Creek wildfire have all been lifted, including for Wells and for Barkerville. With that being said, wildfires continue to challenge people and communities, particularly in the central Kootenay region. We are working closely with impacted communities to ensure that they have the support and resources that they need to keep people safe. As of this morning, there are approximately 1,350 people under an evacuation order, primarily in the central Kootenay region. Additionally, there are 2,800 people under an evacuation alert. The province, communities, wildfire crews, and emergency responders are continuing to do everything that they can do to keep people and communities safe. As images start to emerge of the devastation caused to the town of Jasper and the national park, I know that many British Columbians with treasured memories in Jasper will be mourning the loss. British Columbia will continue to offer support to British Columbia will continue to offer whatever support that we can to Alberta during these challenging times. The BC Wildfire Service has worked with BC communities to send structure protection equipment and personnel to help Parks Canada and the Jasper Fire Department, and people who evacuated from Jasper came through British Columbia for safe passage. I want to again thank all of those communities, businesses, and people who stepped up in a big way to help evacuees feel welcome in such an uncertain time. From Valemont, McBride, Prince George Barrier, Clearwater, and Kamloops, people, community leaders, and businesses came together to support our friends and our neighbors from Jasper. Wildfires are unfortunately not new to us, but neither is helping out people in need. It is part of who we are as British Columbians. Despite cooler weather, I want to encourage everyone to continue being vigilant and being prepared. As we know, the wildfire situation can change quickly, and we may see more fires as temperatures warm up again in the coming days. There is no better time than now to prepare. Ensure that each member of your household is accounted for in your grab-and-go bag. Have it packed and ready to go. Your grab-and-go bag should contain your emergency plan, essential documents, pet supplies, medications, and necessary amounts of food and water. For guidance on creating an emergency plan and packing a grab-and-go bag, please visit preparedbc.ca/emergency-ready. If you know anybody living in wildfire-prone regions, now is the time to connect with them and offer your help. Being under an evacuation alert or order can be highly stressful, so it's crucial that we support one another during these challenging times. If you receive an evacuation order, it is important to evacuate immediately. Follow all instructions from local authorities and use the designated evacuation routes that are identified in the order. Evacuation orders and alerts are placed online and updated and available at emergencyinfobc.ca and contain important information like the location of reception centers for those who may need support during the evacuation. Once you are safely out of an evacuation zone, contact your insurance provider to check on coverage for living expenses during an evacuation. And if you do not have insurance, you can register for emergency support services. We encourage you to create a profile for emergency support services at ess.gov.bc.ca ahead of time to make it easier to get support should the time come. People who have been evacuated from communities in the Regional District of Central Kootenay and Thompson-Nicola Regional District also have the option of receiving self-service supports online at ess.gov.bc.ca. That means that people who have created an ESS profile with their BC Services Card app will have the option of accessing the supports they need via Interact e-Transfer, including the option of receiving $200 per night for accommodation. If people need help getting support, they can call the BC Evacuee helpline at 1-800-387-4258. We welcome thousands of people all over the world, from all over the world into our beautiful province every single year, and we encourage people to continue visiting and enjoying BC safely, but do be prepared and know before you go. Check emergencyinfobc.ca and drivebc.ca wherever you are going to stay up to date on road conditions, highway closures, or evacuation alerts. Fire behavior can be unpredictable, so always be prepared. Stay vigilant and be sure to report any unattended and illegal fires by dialing *5555 from a Canadian cell phone. Reporting fires, big or small, saves lives. Again, I want to express my gratitude to all emergency personnel, firefighters, and search and rescue volunteers who play a vital role in emergency operations. In the last week alone, more than 10 search and rescue crews have been deployed to support wildfire evacuations, and some of these teams have been deployed multiple times. My thanks to them and everyone who has worked tirelessly to protect our communities and support our neighbors. I'd now like to turn it over to Minister Ralston for a wildfire update.
Morning, I'm Bruce Ralston. I'm the Minister of Forests and the Minister responsible for the BC Wildfire Service. I'm grateful to be speaking to you today from the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. First of all, I want to acknowledge everyone who's been impacted by wildfires. It is, as you can imagine, very stressful whether you are living with smoke, on evacuation alert or on evacuation order, or concerned, understandably, about family and friends who may have been impacted. I also want to join with Minister Ma and also acknowledge the terrible loss in Jasper. The images from Jasper are heartbreaking, and I want to thank all the crews and emergency responders who worked day and night to save homes and businesses. BC communities were able to send fire engines and crews from the towns of Valemont, McBride, Beaverley, and Quesnel to help protect buildings in the Jasper Township, which is still encircled by fire. I want to thank those fire departments who answered the call and immediately mobilized to support our neighbors. Helping one another where and when we can is what we do as British Columbians and as Canadians. The BC Wildfire Service and our other emergency responders are working hard to preserve and protect homes, livelihoods, and communities. I want to thank all those fighting wildfires and recognize their tremendous work. As of this morning, there are 349 wildfires burning across British Columbia. 6 are what are called wildfires of note, including 3 in the southeast corner of our province. Many parts of the province are experiencing cool and even wet weather, helping BC crews make headway in knocking down some of these fires. Over the last 7 days, 286 fires have been called out, 44 fires in the last 24 hours alone. But hot weather will return this summer, and fires continue to impact many areas of British Columbia, particularly the southeast. In the Slocan Fire Complex, the BC Wildfire Service has deployed heavy equipment, helicopters, air tankers, structure protection, and hundreds of personnel. This includes more than 100 structural firefighters, municipal firefighters, deployed in coordination with the BC Wildfire Service, working right now to protect homes and properties. Across the province, we have approximately 1,500 personnel directly engaged in wildfire response efforts. They are joined by hundreds of municipal fire departments assisting with structural protection and defense. International personnel in place from Australia, New Zealand, and Alaska, as well as crews from Ontario and the Yukon. In addition to crews, we have received firefighting equipment from Alberta, Nova Scotia, Ontario, Quebec, the Northwest Territories, and the United States. We're naturally very grateful for their support as we work to keep people and communities safe. As we approach August and September, often the most active time for wildfires, we're continuing to put into action task force recommendations to help protect people. That was the Premier's task force that was struck last October and reported out with actionable recommendations that we have indeed implemented this season. We have secured more contracts for helicopters, planes, and equipment early in the season. Already over 304 water tanker missions have been flown this year. We're using more of the latest technology that helps predict how wildfires behave, allowing our crews to respond faster where it matters most. For example, this past weekend, the BC Wildfire Service used new technology to complete over 50 wildfire growth models to support crews on the ground. When you can predict reliably the direction of a fire, obviously that helps you in fighting it. And we strengthen the partnerships and the work we're doing together with communities. We've seen and supported community involvement this year throughout British Columbia. In areas like the Venables Valley near Ashcroft and the town of Argenta, for example, people are getting involved and working with the BC Wildfire Service to help protect their own communities. At this point in the year, it's important that we continue to remain aware, that we do our part to prevent human-caused wildfires by enjoying our province safely. Open burning is prohibited across the province. As a result of cooler conditions and rain across the Prince George and the Northwest, those two fire centres have decided that the campfire ban for those regions will be rescinded, that is, taken off, starting Thursday at noon. If conditions change, campfire bans will be put back in place in these regions. Campfires remain banned in all other regions of the province. Cliff Chapman, who's with us online today, can speak more about the details should you wish to ask questions. While the cooler weather and rain has given us an advantage in many parts of the province, we remind people to stay prepared. And once again, I want to mention the Fire Smart program. Make sure that your homes and communities are following those guidelines. I'm urging everyone to continue to report wildfires using the Wildfire app or by calling *5555 from a cell phone. Even if you believe the wildfire has already been reported, please do not hesitate to contact us. The information you provide may be critical to BC Wildfire Service operations. We're also asking recreational boaters to please keep away from areas where wildfire aviation crews are operating. This also applies to any non-fighting aircraft. Please keep the airspace clear around wildfires. This includes private planes, increasingly drones, and recreational air sports. Drones are a significant hazard to our air crews who are fighting fires, and it is illegal to fly them in fire areas. Let me just conclude by saying our hearts are with the people, communities, and First Nations impacted by wildfire in recent weeks. We are doing everything we can and putting in place resources to ensure people in British Columbia are kept safe. I want to thank everyone in British Columbia and all British Columbians who remain diligent and aware in the midst of a very challenging wildfire situation. And I also thank the firefighters, the first responders, and the emergency management crews who are working hard to protect our province from what is becoming another challenging wildfire season. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Minister Ma.
Thank you so much. We do have time for questions. Experts on the line include Ian Cunnings, Senior Director of Regional Operations with the Ministry of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, Cliff Chapman, Director of Provincial Operations with the BC Wildfire Service, Jonathan Boyd, Hydrologist with the River Forecast Centre, Graham Knox, Director of Emergency Management with the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, and Daryl Gunn, Executive Director of Highways and Regional Services with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Minister. As a reminder for reporters on the phone, please press *1 to enter the queue. That's *1 to ask a question. For media in the room, please line up at the microphone provided and wait to be called. Please make sure to provide your full name and outlet. Media will be limited to one question and one follow-up. We'll begin in the room today. Please go ahead.
Hi, Brianna Charlebois, Canadian Press. I'm just wondering if you could speak to the impacts on tourism now that these types of wildfire seasons are becoming the norm.
Certainly, British Columbia is a wonderful place for people to visit, to tour, and we do want people to continue to come here to British Columbia and enjoy. But it does mean that travelers need to be more vigilant, especially during the summer seasons. We are advising that anyone visiting British Columbia and any British Columbian traveling throughout the province know before you go. Check emergencyinfobc.ca, check drivebc.ca in order to get the current status of the areas of the province that you are traveling to. If you are traveling by car, it is important to have an emergency kit in your car, have sufficient water, food, extra clothing, and emergency gear. It is the case that British Columbia is a beautiful and vast area with many very safe places for people to enjoy and visit. But we do need people also to keep in mind that wildfire conditions can change, and it's important to be prepared. In addition to the steps that I outlined earlier, it also means being prepared with travel insurance too. And that goes for anyone coming to visit British Columbia. It also goes for British Columbians going off to visit other areas of the province and other areas of the world as well.
And I think this follow-up is actually from Minister Ralston. The Squamish Lakes Nation and the Shuswap says that it's come to an accord with the government related to the recovery of last year's Bush Creek East fire, including mushroom harvesting. I'm just wondering if you have a comment.
I'm aware of that fire from last season, but I don't have the details that you've requested. Perhaps Cliff Chapman might be willing to respond to your inquiry.
Yeah, thank you for your question. We'll have to get back to you with the specifics on that agreement. I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't have that information in front of me today, but often we do work with our partners at EMCR and other agencies with First Nation communities and other communities on what that recovery looks like, including things like mushroom harvest. So I don't want to speak to that specific example, but we will provide follow-up.
Any more questions in the room before we turn over to the phones? Our first question on the phones will be Andrea Wu, Globe and Mail. Please go ahead.
Hi, this question is for Bowinn Ma. I was hoping you could speak to the kinds of supports that the province is offering to smaller communities hosting evacuees. So, for example, Bowinn Ma, they had initially welcomed something like 16,000 people. Obviously, they didn't all stay there, but just the kinds of supports that the province is offering to them.
Yeah, so I assume that the example that you're referring to is the Jasper evacuation, the numbers that we were provided from the government of Alberta in terms of the total number of evacuees likely to leave Jasper that evening was up to 25,000, all of whom would have had to travel west along Highway 16 through British Columbia. I really have to express my gratitude again to the mayor of Bowinn Ma, who called me that evening and asked, how do we help? How does my community support all of these evacuees coming through our town? That kind of initiative, that kind of leadership was incredibly important that evening, particularly given the little amount of notice that we received as a province as to these evacuations coming our way. So in my conversations with the mayor of Bowinn Ma, I assured him that he could activate his emergency operations center and that he would be covered for those incremental costs by the province. And those are the kinds of supports that we do provide communities. So in an emergency, if a community needs to activate an emergency operations center, if they need to activate a reception center, we cover all of those additional costs for everything from costs for space if they need to rent a space. Oftentimes they have their own spaces in mind, but additional staffing costs, electricity, power, equipment. So anything that is above and beyond their usual costs are usually covered by the province. There are a list of eligibility criteria for various hazards. So for instance, if a community needs to open up a cooling center, we will cover incremental costs, and there's a table that is provided to communities as to what will be covered. Same with warming centers in the winter, and certainly I guess what I'm expressing is that there are many different types of hazards that we support communities through, and we do provide those additional costs for that they incur in those emergency situations.
Andrea, did you have a follow-up?
I do. I'm wondering how evacuees are dispersed and how that is communicated both to the people who have to flee and to the community. So using the same fire as an example, the mayor of McBride had said that his community was all set up and prepared to accommodate evacuees from Jasper, but that the province didn't get that information out to people and only about 24 people showed up.
Yeah. So, I mean, your question is coming from two different angles, I think. So I'll try to address both. First off, when it comes to a British Columbia community's evacuation, we work with communities to get their evacuation orders and alerts out to their residents in the best way possible. We do work with those communities as to how best to communicate that information. It is very context dependent. There are some communities where social media and radio and TV and emails and calls might be used. There are other communities that might request the province issue a broadcast intrusive alert. That is the alert that is pushed to your cell phones, into the radio, into TV as well. There are also some situations where we will identify with the local community that they require door-to-door support. That means we will actually literally send emergency responders and support personnel door to door to notify people that they need to evacuate as soon as possible. When it comes to the Jasper evacuation, I can't speak to how the government of Alberta and Jasper had the municipality and Parks Canada had communicated to their evacuees. I do know that there was some information that was posted on the Jasper website. Our role as British Columbia was to support Alberta in their coordination of their evacuees. And so we provided whatever support was required and what was requested of us, but I can't provide details as to how Alberta or Jasper or Parks Canada actually communicated directly to their evacuees, did or did not. Yeah.
Our next question is for Wolf Deppner, Black Press. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for taking my question. This might be a question for Cliff Chapman. California is currently experiencing a pretty significant wildfire season that's drawing up a lot of resources. How concerned are you that BC might not be able to call on additional resources from elsewhere because of the demand that California is exerting on its in light of the current situation there? If Cliff could sort of talk about the availability of resources and how the situation in California might impact BC. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. Obviously, we're paying attention to really what's happening across the globe when it comes to wildfire response, because resources are finite, in particular Type 1 trained resources. Fortunately, when it comes to California, they are drawing a lot of resources from the rest of the continental United States and have not ventured as far out as we have in Canada so far this year. So as Minister Ralston spoke to, we have had folks coming over from Eastern Canada, which are experiencing a much lesser severe fire season this year. So Ontario has been largely supportive. But also, I think our relationship building with Australia, New Zealand, and even South America, which still has some availability for us coming into August, whether that be Brazil or Mexico or other agencies. So at this time, it is obviously concerning when multiple agencies are experiencing challenging fire seasons, and there is going to always be that challenge of who needs it the most. But at this time in British Columbia, we feel fairly confident with the resources we've been able to secure, and we continue to forecast out what our needs may be as we head into August. And so far, those needs have been met by other agencies.
Wolf, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, first of all, thank you for that answer. And my follow-up concerns the sort of the weather outlook, for lack of a better term. Obviously, we're experiencing relatively wet conditions in some parts of BC, but as Minister Ralston said, summer may be returning. What is sort of the long-term, the long-term outlook for the next month or so in terms of both temperature and availability of moisture? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. In terms of the long-term, Environment Canada right now continues to forecast, as they have really from the early beginnings of spring, that we're going to see a continued sort of hot, dry pattern as we enter into August. Right now, we're aligning the models in British Columbia that we're going to see another ridge build in by this weekend, at least for the southern part of British Columbia. What a ridge means is that we're going to return to seasonal or above seasonal temperatures. So right now we're forecasting for sort of that Kamloops Fire Center, Southeast Fire Center, we're going to see a return to the low to mid 30-degree temperatures, which, as we've seen in BC, that's very challenging firefighting conditions for our crews and for our response resources out in the field. Right now, it doesn't look, we're unsure when that ridge will break down at this point in time, but we are looking at probably the next 10 to 14 days of seeing little to no rain in the southern part of the province. And that may also push into the north, depending on sort of what happens up there. Fortunately, we did see quite a bit of rain kind of flow through the Northwest and Prince George fire centers over the last 7 days. So that's really knocked down the fire activity in the northern half of the province. We saw enough rain in the southern half of the province to give us some operating time on our challenging fires in the south. But it is summer in BC, and in summer in BC, in particular in August, we are very familiar with seeing that hot, dry weather come and stay, and that's what we're really preparing for. And if we see rain, that'll be really great. But we're preparing that it's going to be dry and hot.
Our next question is George Citizen. Please go ahead.
I wanted to ask Cliff Chapman more about the campfire bans being rescinded. What exactly areas are we going to be able to have fires?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So first off, I think it's just worth noting, and I just mentioned it in my last answer. So we did see quite a bit of rain come into the Northwest and Prince George fire centers. For your specific question around the geographic, it will be the entirety of both of those fire centers. So if you go to bcwildfire.ca, you'll see where our borders are. There's going to be a communication coming out later today, and then the actual rescind will take place on Thursday at noon. The conditions up there are such that we feel confident that at least for the short term, we can allow campfires to return. The fuels are not as receptive to starting fires as we see in the south right now, and as we've seen in the north for the better part of the last 3-4 weeks. But I can't stress enough that should the conditions return in Prince George and the Northwest Fire Centers, we will enact the campfire ban again. But we obviously feel comfortable right now that campfires are not a threat to create wildfires in Prince George and Northwest, and those will be rescinded on Thursday.
Ed, did you have a follow-up?
Oh, yeah. Just one other question. I noticed on the drought map for BC, the Quesnel region south of Prince George, the city, is listed at level 1 drought, which seems kind of strange, but there's no fire ban lifted in the Cariboo. But what can you tell me about that area south of the city of Prince George?
Did you have something to add there, or should we go to Jonathan Boyd?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to it. Yeah, I mean, I can speak to it from a fire perspective, and then Jonathan, if you wanted to speak to the drought. So from a fire perspective, we did see that rain kind of track through the northern part of the Cariboo Fire Center as well. Obviously, has led to some of our success in response on our challenging fires in the northeast portion of the Cariboo Fire Center. You know, what I would say is when we look at the buildup index, which is a sort of a scientific way of saying how receptive are the fuels to fire, We're looking at that every day as an organization in all 6 of our fire centers. And should it come to a point where we feel that we can comfortably lift the prohibition or the Cat 1 and allow campfires, we'll do so, knowing that we may have to put it back on. So, Jonathan, you could probably speak to the drought, but certainly we did see some rain. We did not see as much rain as we had seen in the north and in Prince George over the past 7 days in the Cariboo Fire Center.
Yeah, happy to talk about the drought situation there for the Middle Fraser, which is at level 1. It was a region that was actually at level 3 early in the season, just because of the low snowpack conditions and generally low flow conditions. What did happen was that we did have relatively cool temperatures in May and June, delaying some of the melt of the high elevation snowpack. So conditions did get a little bit better, bumping down to level 2 and now level 1 for the past few weeks. The next meeting of the Provincial Drought Technical Working Group is scheduled for tomorrow. So there is a possibility that the drought levels will change, especially as Cliff outlined with the upcoming forecasts for the next 2 weeks or so with this hot, dry conditions.
Our next question, the CTV. Please go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my question. The first one was just, Mr. Ralston, you mentioned the issue of drones and safety for crews. Has there been any specific issues with that this fire season, as in drones getting in the way or causing a hazard or safety issue for crews?
I would just repeat the general warning of not to fly drones in fire areas. That can really interfere with, obviously, the aircraft that are either water bombing or helicopters that are lifting up water out of a lake, for example, and that really would present a danger to the crews. In terms of specific incidents, I can't cite one, so I'll ask Cliff Chapman from the BC Wildfire Service if there is a specific instance he can bring to your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Minister, and thank you for the question. So this is a challenge for us every fire season, in particular as more and more members of the public have their own drones. And so, like Minister Ralston, I can't speak to a specific incident this year. We're seeing the public being so respectful and of the operations that we are conducting in the air. And I think the message is clear that if we do have a drone incursion that is not under the incident command of our organization, we have to shut down the airspace. And to do that puts obviously a lot of pressure on that fire. So it's kind of similar when we're using our water aircraft, our amphibious aircraft that will scoop water off of lakes. We're seeing that same level of respect from boaters on those lakes that will clear the path for us and get out of the way, so that our water bombing aircraft can actually scoop that water and effectively respond to the fires. So, more than anything, I would say I'd want to thank the public for being so attentive to wildfires in the area and making sure that it's safe for our crews and our aviation staff to operate.
Mel, did you?
Yes, I have a follow-up question. I'm not sure who this would be best put to. I know in some areas where there are evacuation orders, residents are choosing not to leave. I know we encounter this every fire season, but are there any specific areas where this has become a particular concern this summer?
What I'll say is that the vast majority of evacuees leave in a safe and orderly manner when evacuation orders are put in place, and that is incredibly important. I know how difficult it is to have to leave your home and everything that you've known, perhaps the town that you've built your life in, to be worried while you're away that your home might not be there for you when you return. But evacuation orders, are not suggestions or recommendations. They are the law, and they're put in place to help keep people safe and to give firefighting crews an opportunity to actually push back that fire. It is very challenging for emergency response personnel to focus on the fire when they're also worried about the safety of people who have refused to leave. And those are resources that should be focused on actually fighting the fire. And so I do want to acknowledge how difficult it is for residents to have to leave when an evacuation order is put in place, but it is so incredibly important. These orders are not put in place lightly. They're put in place because there is a real and imminent threat to people and to safety.
Our next question is for Corey Sidaway, Check News. Please go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my question. It's probably aimed best at the Wildfire Service there. We're just seeing that the Souk Potholes fire, or the Old Man Lake wildfire, is now being held at 230 hectares. What kind of effort did it take to get to this point? And maybe just for our viewers, what does being held actually mean?
Go ahead, Cliff.
Yeah, thank you. I'll start with the effort that was put forward on that fire, and it is the same effort that we put forward on all fires in BC that have the potential threat to a population or a watershed. So over the weekend, fortunately, with the bit of a downturn in weather, which also helped, we were able to fly a significant amount of our amphibious aircraft. Again, our aircraft that can scoop water, and water was close to that fire, so we were able to really utilize them. But as importantly, we were able to send our paratac smoke jumpers down, who generally base out of Fort St. John. And they came down and they jumped on that fire to really secure the one edge that we were most concerned with growth. And so that crew out of Fort St. John did an amazing job of helping and working with the local crews and the local fire departments that were on scene to really secure the edge of that fire. What being held means is that we don't anticipate that fire to go beyond our identified control lines. So there's still fire, there's still going to see smoke in that area, but it is based on our people on the ground and the work that we've put in to respond to that fire. We do not anticipate that fire going any further beyond the control lines that we have built and or identified, which can be natural features like water features.
And the focus, I guess, on that specific fire at Souk, what's the focus from here onwards? So given the time of year and it's, we're just coming into August, we know that we're going to potentially see some more heat come into this province. The focus really is about moving in from those control lines, working in from the control lines to try to continue to put that fire out, in particular on the edges. So, we'll work in 20 feet, then 100 feet, then 300 feet, and really get to that point where even if weather changes or wind hits maybe the fire in the middle of that fire in particular, that it won't go beyond the identified control line. So it's a lot of hard ground work now that's left on that fire, and we've got resources on it to do that really difficult work, in particular in some of the terrain of that fire. But it really is just really actioning it in from those control lines in and reducing any of the active fire within the whole perimeter of that fire.
Today goes to Julie Landry, Radio Canada. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. It's my first one to Minister Ma. You talked about the financial support given to communities, but my colleague Jennifer is in Castlegar right now, and the big challenge right now is accommodation for the evacuees. Is there a will to maybe improve the system or give more help to those communities in the future weeks or years even to better accommodate evacuees?
Yeah, so this speaks to the work that we have been doing to improve emergency support services here in British Columbia since the 2023 wildfire season. So the Premier launched the Premier's Expert Task Force on Emergencies, and that task force identified a number of recommendations that we could implement immediately ahead of the 2024 wildfire season. Now, some of those recommendations are still underway, but we have successfully implemented many of those recommendations on both the side of fighting wildfires and also on the side of providing supports to evacuees. So based on the 2023 wildfire season, what we experienced in the central Okanagan when we had mass evacuations that overwhelmed local authorities' ability to process evacuees through local reception centers. We took lessons learned from that and adjusted our program. So one of the significant changes that we have made to emergency support services is the introduction of a new $200 per night accommodation allowance. This is in addition to the accommodations referral program that previously existed and continues to exist with local governments working with the province on. So just for greater clarity, if you are an evacuee and you require support for accommodations, you have a number of choices. You can go to a reception center, and in any evacuations in any evacuation situation, there will be a reception center organized for that community. The evacuee can go to the reception center and either request a referral directly into accommodations. So those are accommodations that have been prearranged in a partnership with the local municipality to be set up for evacuee accommodation, or they can request a $200 per night accommodation allowance and take that cash, which is received through e-transfer, and go anywhere. They can go to a campsite, they can stay in their RV, they can go to a family or friend's place, they can even go to a completely different community in a completely different province if they wish, in order to find accommodations. Now that change was that change occurred in response to what we saw, where some communities do have challenges establishing those formal accommodation options. And so by allowing evacuees to receive cash through e-transfer, it greatly increases the distance that they're able to travel in order to actually find those accommodations. Now, in addition to that, we are working with the BC Hotel Association. They've launched a new app that is being piloted in Kamloops, in Prince George, and in Kelowna, where they're able to get accommodation providers to opt into this app and allow emergency response personnel to see vacancies basically in real time. So this is this also increases the amount of information available to local governments and emergency management personnel in how they manage evacuees. We also do work with various accommodation providers on opening up work camps as well in cases of mass evacuation. Pardon me, I should say that again. I'm starting to ramble here now. To open up group accommodations. We do work with work camps to open up group accommodations in cases of mass evacuation as well. We've done that across the province.
Julie, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, and it might be for Mr. Chapman. There was a lot of talk in this press conference today about being ready, getting prepared, always be prepared. Was it noticed in the last weeks that people were not prepared enough in different fires?
Yeah, thank you for your question. No, I wouldn't say that, actually. I would say, given the heat wave that BC was experiencing, I think through kind of continued active communication, both at a local, regional, and provincial level, I think the public in BC was well aware that there was going to be a potentially challenging wildfire season afoot for the whole province, not just as we had focused so much in Prince George in the early part of April, May, and June. So I would say that the public was prepared, and I would say additionally that as BC Wildfire Service, that we also had done things slightly differently this year in terms of our own preparedness. We had additional aircraft on. We had already brought in some resources from Australia and from other parts of Canada ahead of the potential of this heat wave that was followed by lightning that really kind of cast through the Southeast and Kamloops fire centers and started many of these fires. So I would say that as a province, we were as prepared as we have ever been for what we experienced, and what we're going to experience for the rest of this fire season.